So, who am I talking to?
Hi, this is Matt Hansel, cartoonist.
Well, tell me about your work.
Oh, sure. I have been a professional cartoonist for about 27 years now. I have most known for my work on Underdog, Pink Panther, Rocky and Bullwinkle, and the classic kind of comic strip characters, or cartoon characters. And right now I am promoting a book an anthology I worked on that I had a story in for Tales of the Cryptic Closet #4.
You said the artwork in your contribution to that anthology is very inspired by Dick Tracy.
Yes, Chester Gould and one of his assistants, Dick Loker, who later took over the strip, are huge influences of mine. And when I got Ben's script and he had some character descriptions in it, that was immediately what popped into mind. And so I told him about it. He's like, yeah, do it. So I did it in a Dick Tracy kind of style, or at least as close as I could get. And I really enjoyed doing it, I found out. It was a lot of fun to work in that style. And this is only the second horror story I've done. So it was even more exciting to work in the genre again, the horror genre, because I love it.
What was your first horror story?
It was for American Mythology. It was a book called Cartoon Puppet Horror Theater. And it's about a bunch of Muppets that get caught in a universe where they're chased around by a guy with a meat cleaver who's coming after them. And we did that 2 years ago.
Nice. And you're very inspired by comic strips when you're drawing comic books.
Yes. I grew up reading all the classic comic strips, Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes and Hagar the Horrible and Beetle Bailey and all the rest. And so that has had a tremendous influence on my art style and my approach to doing things, and some of the esoteric things I think that people don't think about, like the lettering and placement of black space in the paper and things like that.
Oh, so you grew up on Calvin Hobbes?
Yes.
How old are you?
I am 49.
Okay. Right.
So I'm right in the right age to have read the whole thing in real time as it was being published.
Yeah, for sure.
and Bill Watterson is a big influence on me.
Nice.
I have my own characters, Marty and Spud, and they take some inspiration from Calvin and Hobbes, but also Dennis the Menace, and another strip from the 30s called Dickie Dare, which was about a boy who would fall asleep while reading a book, and then he'd wake up in the book, him and his dog, and then they'd have to finish the adventure.
Nice. So before we started recording, we were talking about the idea that comic books are a medium, not a genre, and in theory you can do all kinds of things with the comic book, but there's a surprisingly few number of people who are actually drawing in comic strip style in comic books.
Yeah, I haven't figured that out. In the old days, in like the 50s and 60s, the goal was always to have a comic strip. That was the pinnacle of a cartoonist's career. And you were slumming it if you were in comic books. And now that's switched. Now everyone wants to have their own comic book.
Yeah.
But in the 50s and 60s, there was more of an attempt by the artists to emulate the newspaper strips. And you're right. Now that just doesn't seem to exist that much anymore. I off the top of my head, I can't even think of one.
Yeah, I can't either. Like, that's something when I read the Tales from the Cryptic Closet 4 anthology and reviewed for CBR, and I got to your anthology. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like in the style of a comic strip.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that story. The script was written by Ben Miller.
Yeah, Ben Miller wrote the script. And it's a story about a police detective who's hunting a demonic serial killer, or satanic serial killer. And it has a neat Twilight Zone kind of twist at the end of the story, which I think I won't spoil for anyone. But it has a really neat twist in it, and that's what really drew me to the story and really propelled me to draw it, was to get to that twist ending.
Nice. And even though it's like very much in the style of comic strips, it's still very much a comic book in the way that you lay out the panels. There's even a splash page with the creepy reveal, which I always like to see in horror comics.
Yeah, and because I knew this was going to be a horror comic, I really thought about a lot of black placement. You want to use a lot of shadows. One of the characters, you don't ever really see his face. It's always in shadow, which is a trick I picked up from Batman artist Noah Brayfogle. That definitely in my approach was to have a lot of black. I wanted to have as much black as I could justify.
Are you a fan of Howard Shakin?
I am. I'm a huge fan of Howard. I even took his, during the pandemic, he offered a course called The Paradigm. And it was a 3-part course about how he makes comics. And I took the course, and it influenced me tremendously. I love Howard's work. He's one of the few people in comics who, no matter what the project is, if he's doing it, I'm in.
Nice. Fair enough. So why?
Why? I think Howard, he pushes boundaries in a good way, and I love his art. I think he's one of the most talented artists that's out there working, and he really makes his style work for his stories. And he's thought about the coloring and the lettering, and so everything is a complete package complementing each other. And I think that's a somewhat rarity in comics, where it's a perfectly cast book. It's him on writing and drawing, and usually Ken Brunswick doing the lettering, and that right there is just a perfect graphic marriage.
Nice. And so you said that you have a degree in journalism, and you even worked in journalism.
Mm-hmm.
Can you? And I mean, I imagine that there's a connection between newspaper comic strips to a certain degree and being a journalist.
Yes. Yeah, that was. I knew I wanted to be a writer or creator of something kind of thing as a kid, and I was really pushed towards doing journalism and things like that. And so that's what I did, and my love of newspaper comic strips really propelled that as well, because I wanted to be in the newspaper and alongside Dick Tracy and whoever else.
Well, I personally, I grew up reading newspaper comic strips, and I didn't really read comic books until I was an adult. I know people always talk about, I grew up reading comic books. I didn't really. I grew up reading comic strips. Are you similar?
Yeah. There were no comic shops when I was growing up, so the newspaper comics were my fix, because otherwise I had to wait until we went to the pharmacy or the gas station or something to try to find a niche. And as you know, back then, getting consecutive issues was hard, right? You might get issue 5, but not see issue 6, and then all of a sudden issue 7 was out. So newspaper strips were a way to consume that material on a daily basis, because we would get a newspaper every day, and so I could read Dick Tracy every day, or the Phantom, or Spider-Man, or whatever.
So do you ever, you mentioned Bill Watterson and Howard Shakin, both of those guys, they include a lot of social commentary in their work. Is there any of that in your stuff?
Not yet. I don't think I've reached a level where I can incorporate it without it being too ham-fisted, you know what I mean? So as I mature as a creator and work on that, I think will start creeping in. But right now, it doesn't have a ton of that in it. Marty and Spud's probably the closest thing I do to social commentary, and that's more just about living life every day to the fullest extent and having an adventure and stuff like that.
And so you mentioned that the twist at the end of Tales of the Cryptic Closet 4 strip, that's what drew you in. Were you going to kind of do it anyway, or how did the Guerrilla Comics approach you?
I had Guerrilla publishes my books, Marty and Spud.
Okay.
And so when they were putting the team together for Tales 4, they asked me if I'd be interested in doing a story. And I said, yeah. And they said, Ben's got a script. And I said, all right, Ben is one of my favorite writers. I think Ben is eventually going to be recognized as, a talent on the level of Denny O'Neil in terms of his comic book writing. So I was excited to do a story that he had written.
Nice. And the twist definitely makes it. It's very memorable.
Yes.
And so Well, how did you approach how did you approach how much was the panels written by? Did you choose panel layout, or did
Ben just listed, panel 1 description, panel 2 description. He didn't say anything about layouts or anything like that, so I did the layouts on my own, based on his panel description.
So then, how did you approach, drawing that build up?
Oh, when I was thinking about it, I thought it would work well in a grid format, because I think horror, if you play it straight, that makes it scarier, that makes it weirder or something like that. So I didn't do elaborate layouts or weird layouts or anything. I just did pretty much a grid system. And I think that helps move the story along. I hope it makes it creepier.
So why do you love comics?
I love comics because they were always important to me as a kid, particularly daily comic strips. But it is a medium that has such potential to do anything. And especially nowadays, there's comic books about cooking. There's comic books about fixing your car. There's comics about everything these days. And so I think the genre is finally the medium is starting to live up to its potential in that it can do anything.
So right now we're at the book release party for Tales from the Cryptic Closet 4. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it right now?
I'm feeling good. We've had a good crowd. The store's been busy. We've had a lot of people come through, and it's been exciting. This is the first time in a long time that all the Guerrilla gang has been in one spot. So it's been great just catching up with everybody, because I haven't seen them in person in quite some time.
Do you live in Chicago?
I live just outside of Chicago in the northwest suburbs.
How much does Chicago or the Chicago area influence your work? Because I guess Ben wrote the script, but it explicitly takes place in Chicago.
Yeah, being near the city is an influence because Chicago is a rich cultural, international city, and it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And just the ambiance of the city and the sounds and the spectacle of it all has an influence on me. Because I live out in the country, so the tallest building is 3 stories. So to come into the city where you have real buildings and things like that, I love. It's fantastic, and every time I come to the city, I'm recharged again to work more on comics again.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Yeah, you just feel the energy, and it inspires you to draw.
Right. Exactly. And it's great for reference, thinking about cities and what buildings look like, and street corners and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have a friend, an artist friend, who he's finding himself as an artist right now. He's kind of somewhat he would call himself a beginner. He looks pretty advanced to me, and he says he struggles with drawing buildings.
Buildings can be a pain, but once you figure out that they're just giant blocks, and then you just add the garble, windows and gargoyles and stuff, then it becomes simpler. But everyone's got to come up with their own way of reaching that conclusion.
You definitely drew some buildings, even some creepy buildings, in your Tales from the Cryptic Closet 4.
Thank you.
I think that's but I actually already asked you the question I would usually close an interview like this with, but I can just ask it again though. Why speak again? Why do you love comics?
It's the potential of the medium. It can do anything. One of the things that inspires me every day is that Congressman John Lewis was inspired by a comic book that he read about Martin Luther King Jr. That is what inspired him to pick up the banner of the Civil Rights Movement and the whole thing. And I thought, if you could create a comic book and have that kind of an influence on someone who then has a huge influence on history, what an amazing gift! What an amazing thing! And so I humbly hope that someday one of my stories inspires someone to do something great and do something historic.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.